Um, Normally, I wouldn't even become involved with the aspect of a private road, and I don't think you want me to be involved with private roads, but I also feel that they're taxpayers as well, and they pay property taxes, and so if they ask a question from the city about things in general, I'm glad to talk to them about that and provide advice and direction in this case. In this case, I cite, and I've said it in my letter, there was requests about special assessment districts perhaps for the assessment of the cost of this road from another property owner. There was questions about engineering. I gave them advice based upon correspondence and questions I had with Jamie about reputable civil engineering firms that he knows of that would be small, that would be willing to take this position, that would be reputable in the sense of using sound engineering practices. So we provided that to him. So the involvement became there, and then Dwight and Katie had contacted me. Katie first asked me some questions about how I approached road projects, and I told her cautiously I would look at these things and suggest that they look at that as well. I don't want to get too much into that, but the fact of it is that I agree that there are some aspects of the road that if it were my project, would have been done differently, but I don't have the budget that they do, constraints. I have a larger budget, but I also speak to a larger audience, if you will, as far as responsibilities. My roads have to last for 15 to 20 years, and so we have specifications that reflect that. But I had felt that we needed to be on record to the association about our concerns about the road, and they coincide to a degree to both Katie and Dwight's concerns. We did meet with Claudia, and I can't pronounce her last name, and the road commissioner, Christian Drury, last week, and they explained the nature of their contract with Cranbrook. So I think we have a better picture of what their contract had entailed. And I know that the association is meeting again at the end of this month to decide what they're going to do with the sides of the roads. In our conversation with them, Jamie and I suggested that Jamie suggested the aspect that the shoulders needed to be done as soon as possible. I urged that perhaps for consistency's sake, they get one contractor rather than relying upon each of the property owners to do it piecemeal, because you want to make sure that the installation of the shoulder, to me, is consistent, and the application of whatever you put on there, everyone can say that it has this amount of gravel, this amount of topsoil, and it's sloped at a certain percentage and everything else, rather than being done at a hodgepodge. I don't know if they took our considerations to heart or seriously or not. They appeared to be. But we also offered our availability, if you will, to the next meeting that they have, which is again on September the 30th. Going back to what Jamie had said, when Katie and Dwight came in to see me initially, they pointed out this aspect of the grading ordinance. And at first reading, I had equal concern, because it appears to me that maybe we have an obligation, I don't know. So I did contact Jamie. I said, how do you read this in prior practice with the city, since you've been here with the city longer than I have as far as civil engineering experience? And Jamie, similar examples that he gave you tonight was the ones that he cited to me, parking lots and other roads. And I said, well, I tend to agree. If someone said we're going to resurface a road, a private road that already exists, I wouldn't have thought to require a grading ordinance application that would be reviewed, because they're just simply taking out one surface and replacing it with a newer one. I don't know what the defining moment is, but I know that the defining moment for Katie and Dwight is on July 27th. They had a pretty good size pool of water in their front yard that was fast approaching their front door, and I think everyone would be concerned about that.
Bill, do you have some comments?
I've had an opportunity to hear the gentleman and also to review the materials. It would seem to me, first of all, that as it pertains to the contract between the association to repave the road, that even though the association may be satisfied with the end result, is what I read and hear, if these property owners are not satisfied, they are what we call third-party beneficiaries of this contract, and that would give them a right to sue the contractor for trespass for causing the flooding on their property. That's a private cause of action whereby the property owner, being a beneficiary of the contract, would sue the contractor for violating the terms of the contract. Now, as it relates to the city's involvement, certainly in such a lawsuit, the property owner could argue that had the contractor obtained a permit from the city, perhaps this could have been avoided. As far as the city's responsibility is concerned, for violating the ordinance, that's strictly a civil offense in which a district court could impose a fine against the city for $500, but that's not going to solve the property owner's dispute. So my thought is it's a private cause of action. However, I think, as Jay just pointed out, the city could use its good offices to try to assist the property owner, that even though we may not have any responsibility to do so, to the degree that we can bring some pressure on the contractor to try to rectify this problem, however it should be rectified, perhaps with the assistance of Jamie Burton and with the auspices of the city assisting the property owners, you can perhaps bring this to a result that's favorable and alleviate this future flooding, and hopefully without the necessity and expense of a lawsuit. But I really think that their remedy, as I read everything, is that they have a cause of action against this contractor for what he has caused to them, the damage that he has caused to them.
I think Jamie's correct, where this is kind of a tenuous situation and it's very delicate, where just a little twist or two could be a problem. So you almost have to continuously work out the problems, but it takes a contractor willing to do that.
Right. Michael, in all due respect to Jamie's assessment of the situation, I had said before he wasn't intimately familiar with everything before it was regraded and dug out, and it was, as you can see from some of the pictures we have before and after, there's a good 10 to 12 inches difference. That's significant when you're talking about a downhill flow of water. And in the area where we're talking about grading it so that the water can run off, there are a couple of areas where that can help. There's a large area, and Jamie actually pointed it out to us also, which we knew about, where the water had been flowing out, and you can see it's a big muddy puddled area in kind of a no man's land in front of the pond, if you're familiar with the big pond that's there. And now you would have to have an act of God to make the water run uphill to drain there, where the contractor's quote said compacting and grading and compacting for drainage was included, and they did nothing of the sort.
And if the contractor, if I may, if the contractor is not willing to stand by to try to correct the problem, and again, I appreciate the fact there's an expense involved, but the homeowner can go out, get a contractor, correct the problem, that establishes his measure of damages, and then he brings a lawsuit to recover those damages against the contractor.
Can we do that on other property owners, because each property owner owns a part of the street?
Yeah, but the flooding is on your property, and so you're a proper party to bring that action.
We can go on to the...
I mean, I hate to have people have to incur expense for something like this, and again, I think the city can do everything it can to try to bring pressure upon the contractor to do what is right. But there is a remedy to prevent future flooding, even though there's a cost involved.
Not 90 years it hasn't ever.
I might even suggest maybe you talk to Nick directly and see if he's willing to work it out with you. And
we notified him and he hasn't responded.
Yeah. Yes, Commissioner?
Couple comments. I'm completely sympathetic to what's happening here. I've built many roads in my business. We don't do it without engineering for reasons just like this. the slightest change in grades can lead to flooding or ponding issues. And I just find it amazing that that was not taken into consideration. But I'm listening to all this and I'm trying to understand what's the city's connection with this situation. And I'd like to ask our attorney, Bill, to comment on the ordinance that was cited by this gentleman as far as the city having some obligation or interest or responsibility for private property work of this kind. Bill, does that apply to this situation? Does the city have any obligation pursuant to that ordinance?
I think, well, you know, in terms of liability, as you know, the city enjoys governmental immunity, so I don't think there's an argument that the city is liable. I think the issue as it pertains to compliance with the ordinance is an argument that the property owner would use against the contractor if there was a lawsuit saying to the contractor, had you applied to the city, whether you were required to or not, a good practice would have required you to apply to the city for a permit and give the city a grading permit. And had you done so, this problem could have been averted. I think that's where that ordinance comes into play.
In looking at the situation, the contractor should have submitted, or should have at least come to the city and said, this is what we plan to do. We plan to take 10, 12 inches out of this road, lower it, tilt it this way, tilt it that way, and create a situation where the water cannot run uphill to drain, and we're going to divert it all into Mr. and Mrs. Diener's property. Is this okay? Because we're just saying that we're only resurfacing the road, we're not redesigning it.
Apparently
But then they actually did redesign it, and that's what the
Right,
road
and-
commissioner did state, that she redesigned it and they changed the topography, which is the exact wording in the code. You're not to change the topography. You're not to change the diversion of the water. You're not to affect the downstream properties. And you have six residences dumping all their water, including the water from the uppermost driveway, which is a huge driveway and very, very deep slant. So all that water is pouring into the road in addition, and it's all dumping into our driveway. We never had one drop of water come off the road into our driveway before. Now we have a ton. And you can see from the pictures the significant drop.
No, there's no doubt you've got a
They've
problem.
created a channel. You
Yeah,
can, now you can't go 30, 40 feet and grade all that down. There's nowhere for it to go.
There's no doubt there's a problem, but it's not.
Yeah,
Let me conclude by
Yeah.
just saying, I think they've got a private cause of action.
Right.
There's a whole body of law about people that cause flooding onto other people's property.
Right.
It's called trespass.
Right.
They're entitled to damages. They may have to go out and have somebody correct the problem and then sue the contractor to recover their money, which I think they would be successful in doing based upon everything that I have heard. My recommendation would be that you hire a lawyer, and hopefully if he sends a letter to this contractor, it may bring him to his senses to come out there and correct the problem. If he doesn't, then I think you have to go to court. But I think you've got a good case.
My hopes would have been to
You wanna-
settle everything
Of course,
amicably
you want
and
to
reasonably.
You want to avoid court if you can, because it's an expensive way to resolve a problem.
It's not.
But this contractor doesn't seem to want to step up to his responsibilities to correct this, and maybe if you retain a lawyer and he sends a letter to him, he may realize that he's in for trouble if he doesn't come out and do what is right. So that's what I.
And then I